well, I'm not sure we're really killing people. First of all, it's the person who's deciding to speed up a death. And again, the way the law is now, it's limited to people who are dying anyway. It's a question of the timing of their death. But they're still you're still killing people. And it is this wrong. It's always wrong to kill someone and or to assist them in speeding up their death. So there's no way we can have this law. And again, that's actually, when you get down to it, I'm not saying the empirical arguments are a fig leaf, because I think some people really do believe that those are valid considerations. But I think for some people who are opposed to legalization, it is a fig leaf. They know that sanctity of life isn't going to appeal to everyone, so they drum up these arguments about all the horrible consequences, right, that was supposed to happen. Well, why is it that we prohibit killing? Is it because that life is sacred in some way? I mean, we often heard that term, and I certainly don't mean to in any way diminish the significance of life. I want to live. I think most people want to live. But that's just it, isn't it? Again, I said, we need to think, when we think about our moral norms, we need to think about the underlying rationale for our moral norms. And I think in general, our moral norms do serve some general purposes. I mean, why do we have morality? Isn't it essentially so we can live together, if you think about it, right? I mean, that's how it developed. And again, back 100, 150,000 years ago when we had the first human or proto-human community, it's not like people sat around and said, okay, these are rules we have to follow. No, they just developed naturally. And they developed naturally because it turned out that groups that had these norms tended to have better survival rates than groups that didn't have these norms. So it's kind of ingrained in us the sense that, well, yeah, we need to respect the lives of other people, and certainly if we go around killing each other, whatever little group or tribe we're in isn't going to last very long, right? So we have this norm that it's presumptively wrong to kill someone else because killing is a harm, in fact, pretty serious harm, right? But that's because most people want to live. So yeah, if you want to live and I kill you, that's a wrong, right? It's maybe the most serious harm I could inflict on you. And I'm going to be justly condemned by others in society for taking someone's life. So we have the norm against killing because, again, it allows us to live in peace. People want to live. We recognize if we kill each other, we're not going to be able to survive. But does that rationale apply in a situation where someone is terminally ill and is begging to be put to death or to hasten his or her death? Because if the assumption is we don't kill people because they want to live, here we have someone who doesn't want to live any longer. They want to hasten their death because they are getting nothing out of life. They're going to be dead in a few weeks anyway. It's just a question of whether they die now in some peace and maybe surrounded by their family, or go through 3 or 4 weeks of meaningless agony where they can't do anything, can't make any choices, maybe suffering horribly. Does our norm against bringing about someone's death or assisting in bringing about someone's death apply in that situation? I would suggest it doesn't. So if we look at the underlying rationale for norms, I would say that we can see that this kind of blanket prohibition that in every circumstance we can't play any role in bringing about someone's death simply doesn't make sense. So this whole idea, this slogan that we have, sanctity of life, that's all it is. It's a slogan. It's an unthinking slogan. It's a reflection of dogma. And I think it's incumbent upon us as secularists to go beyond dogma and to think about these issues. So as you can probably tell, I am in favor, again, with the appropriate safeguards, of legalizing assistance in dying. And right now, as I said, in Oregon, now just in Washington State, in the last election, it's been approved. In Canada, my understanding is it's still illegal. In fact, I looked at the Canadian Criminal Code. I think it's 14 years that someone could get, in theory, be sentenced to jail if they assist in bringing about someone to death. Although I think someone told me that one of the first cases that went to trial involved someone in Quebec who helped maybe their uncle die. Are you familiar with the case? Anyway, I was told that the case went to trial, but the jury refused to convict the person. So I mean, I think that shows that there is a reluctance in society to say, so we really could bring criminal charges against someone who's helping someone else to end their agony at that person's request. All right, so that's assistance in dying. That's one topic. Another topic I want to talk about is the question of enhancing human capacities through drugs or genetic engineering. Something that is likely to come about, is right here to some extent. In fact, I'll be talking later about one very important enhancement that's been around for decades, not often acknowledged as an enhancement. But, you know, there are other things that, you know, people take, for example, drugs for attention deficit disorder, not because they have attention deficit disorder, but because it sharpens their cognitive skills. There's modafinil, which is a drug that you can take to increase your alertness. It's used by the military, so soldiers can stay awake for long periods of time. And where, you know, people are developing other drugs and also doing some work with genetics that hold the promise of increasing our capacities. Capacities for endurance, capacities to increase our intelligence, cognitive skills, visual acuity, the whole range of things, resistance to disease. And you would think, well, that sounds pretty good, right? But again, we have a lot of people opposed to it. And it's usually based kind of on an instinctive reaction because, well, why are they opposed to it? Well, just like they've been opposed to any development of medical technology. I mean, beginning with organ transplants. Some of you may be old enough to remember. I certainly remember when the first heart transplant was done. There was a huge outcry about, oh, this is immoral. I mean, you're taking one person's soul and put it in another person's soul. It's horrible, right? You can't do that. Well, fortunately, that resistance slowly faded away, so that now organ transplants are more or less accepted. There's still some religious sects that oppose it, but nowadays it's more or less accepted. But, you know, then we had in vitro fertilization, and, you know, a lot of huge hue and cry about that. Oh, this is ungodly, unnatural, we can't do it. You still have some opposition to that. And, you know, as I said, any new development in technology usually brings about this kind of instinctive reaction. Gee, it's unnatural. Or if we do it, we're playing God. Now, I never understood that argument, even if there's a God, because, you know, if you think about it, basically they're saying, well, gee, if you make this decision, you're playing God. Well, if you make a decision either way, you're playing God, right? Because if you decide not to use the technology, you're making a decision. And if you decide to use the technology, you're making a decision. So you have to make a decision. You can't avoid making a decision. So presumably, you're playing God either way. But, you know, it fails to appeal to some people. Well, same thing with enhancements, right? It's just horrible somehow. Like, enhancements, my God, how do we do that? You know, we have human nature, we're tinkering with